So welcome. Fragmentation, right? Anybody want to talk about AI search and all that? Anybody talked about that over the past few weeks? So let me do a couple introductions, myself and then my panelists here. And then I'm going to frame a little bit about what we're talking about today. But in the end, obviously I like to talk, but I should not be talking much, right? So I will help guide this conversation. So I'm Eli Goodman. I run big data at Semrush. I founded a company called Datos a bunch of years ago. We were acquired by Semrush and now onward to Adobe. So when it comes to anything data as a service, that's my entire universe. Like I am in the sugar business and I sell to people that make cakes, right? That's really like how we think about it. But like, again, I'm just here to moderate today. I want to introduce, and I'll start with Reema here. So Reema Sanghvi, who is the global lead for emerging ecosystem partnerships at Accenture. So maybe if you could tell people what that means, what exactly
Absolutely.
you do.
So what that means, so a little bit more of a background. I've been with Accenture for 25 years. And so I've certainly seen a lot of the work we've done across the front office, the way these capabilities have evolved over the last decades, I guess, although it seems a little bit crazy to say that. And in this role, I'm really looking at the myriad of ecosystem partners that are coming to life right now in support of the front office. So we've seen the largest investment ever really in the technical enablement of customer experiences across everything from the design of digital products all the way through what we traditionally call customer service and support. As we've seen, that kind of experience journey really looks more like an infinity loop than it does like a linear line. And the number of partners that really lean in at various points in that journey and those that kind of serve across. So for Accenture Song, I look after all those partners that are beyond the big ones that you know, and how we bring those to life in service of the solutions we bring our clients and how we help them evolve the experiences they're providing their customers. Although a couple of years ago, I had the pleasure of caring for Accenture's Adobe relationship. So I'm certainly familiar with that story as well.
It's just a fascinating vantage point. I can't wait to flesh that out a little bit. And then I also would like to introduce, last but not least, Ashley Penn. So she's Senior Director of Digital Marketing at Adobe. And the same, maybe give us a little bit of background on like why you're up here and like what you do.
Yeah, no, I have to say, well, I'm a little envious of your mic, Semrush and Adobe company branded. Not salty about that, but I've been with Adobe for the better part of 12 years now, and I joined actually as a consultant prior to that. So I was working on I joined, I think, the very week that we transitioned from Creative Suite to the cloud. So you can imagine how exciting that time was in terms of moving from, an always-on perpetual model to thinking about like marketing that, just never sleeps essentially, and the role of in product, et cetera. So have seen my fair share of transformations living in that world and now SaaS to AI. On the digital side, I lead all things media and advertising, all of our direct channels in conversational and email, partner really closely with our web partners at Adobe and work across brand and demand objectives for all things enterprise specifically. So bringing a B2B lens to today's conversation.
It's amazing. My new colleague at Adobe, very excited to be working together. We've actually had a chance to get to know each other a little bit. It's very fun, for a little guy like me joining up with a big mothership. But let's go ahead and get into it. I think the main theme here is about brand visibility, like fragmentation, right? I think that I've been doing this a long time, since the late 90s, and things used to be very different, right? And the science has been laid out for decades now about the funnels and the metrics, and exactly how to attribute things, and somebody does X, that does Y, and that does Z, and that entire thing has been completely destroyed. In fact, now it's exciting. It's just how do we figure out where to even begin, right? And I think that curly Q of consumer journey, as we all are dealing with, is not only where does it play, the quantitative, who, what, where, when, and how. How often is it happening? Why? When are people doing it? What are they saying? What are the prompts? Upper funnel, mid funnel, lower funnel. But then, what really matters? What are you solving for? Are you solving for the agents themselves that are out there, as I jokingly call it, electronic butlers, gathering things for people to be able to put that in a central place? Are you optimizing for the people? Right? Is it really more about, I can't deal with what was my classic funnel and I could solve for search or video or whatever it's going to be. Now they're all kind of mixed together in a way that fragmentation is problematic. So I'll say this, the main theme of what we want to talk about today is, I'm sure you've sat on a lot of panels, right? And we're doing a lot of, as I jokingly be, people read the news, right? Here's what's happened. But that's fine. That's a diagnostic, right? That's easy to be like, here's the problem, but I really want us to flesh out today is the prescription. What are we going to do about it? And that's where, that's it. Like, so let me go ahead and I want to move. We're going to start with Ashley, right? And then we'll sort of jump back and forth, but I think that, like, let's start with this, right? Like, Adobe put out a statistic that your AI, let's say, driven visitors are 3 times as likely to convert, right? So what are you doing about that? How do you take that data? What's the plan? Like, help flesh that out for this group here.
Yeah, I mean, I think like many of you, we've seen this trend play out for the last couple of years now, actually. So like declining search, both paid and organic sources of traffic, and then, of the traffic that's coming to our site, we are seeing some nice lift in sort of intent, right? Whether that's for us, request for a demo, request to contact sales, et cetera. So, I think much of what we're trying to do here, and I'll maybe give a little bit of context on the enterprise part of our business. So we market to many of the roles in this room. So CMOs, heads of digital web, technology partners, creative and content folks. And we've recognized this for a long time that you as buyers are, showing up to conversations day one with us incredibly informed and knowledgeable and are sophisticated, right, in terms of your understanding of technology and the roles of marketing and all the players in our ecosystem. So if you're coming to your first touch point with us with your day one shortlist largely formed, that means you're not curious, you're not open, you're decided. For marketers, it presents a really interesting challenge for us, right? So it's how do we sort of think about how we build a reputation around Adobe and what we offer from an enterprise standpoint when those conversations are increasingly off our grid, essentially. So for us, it really started, it's gone back to basics to a large extent in terms of how do we get really crisp on who our customer is? So like basic market research in terms of, let's get into the brain space of a CMO and understand how they're engaging in these LLM services. What are the questions they're asking of the likes of ChatGPT, Perplexity, et cetera. And that's effectively what we're calling our, Uber prompt strategy. I think we've established that that's very different than like a keyword sizing and traditional search exercise to understand how your audience is engaging with queries related to your brand and your offerings. And so, in the context of building out that prompt strategy, like we're kind of calling this like, it's like B2B, the new generation of B2B personalization, agent-based marketing is actually what we're calling it. So the new ABM, account-based marketing for those not in B2B, that's been the thing that we've organized around over the last decade or so. And that really means that we're really getting sharp on, again, how our audience engages in their question sets that they're posing. So if we think about how this shows up in like an LLM interaction, we maybe want to be showing up when someone's asking what is agentic marketing. Yeah, that's a term that has lots of volume, could be a thing that we want to engage with. But instead, we're actually looking to understand from a CMO's vantage point, more like intentful conversations that they're looking to have. So I am meeting with my board next week. I need to build a business case around the use of AI to drive out production costs in my content supply chain. How do I prepare for that? I work in a regulated industry. I know I need to have a lot of, guardrails in place for anything I generate with AI. Those are the conversations that we want to show up in. So for us, like it kind of pragmatically, we started with that audience first and really getting sharp on those conversations. And that's kind of the first step in our playbook that we've established around how we think about showing up in these moments. From there, you can build topics, you can size them, you can baseline your brand visibility against them. You can kind of start to articulate a content strategy around like, well, how am I going to stimulate how I show up in that type of conversation? But we know that, we've got to start somewhere, and it requires both kind of art and science to do that. So that's been kind of the cornerstone of how we've approached this increasingly fragmented discovery landscape that we're navigating.
No, I mean, it's a big shift, right? Like you go back to solving for the channel, right? It'd be like, okay, I have my search team, I have my video team. Like you have sort of these silos and everybody has their success metrics. And it's very difficult to be able to say, well, not only here's the strategy, but here's the resources and money and budget we should put towards them. And how do we all get credit for that? Right. So I'd actually love to have Reema talk a little bit about operationally, how have you been advising clients to be able to do exactly that, like shifting from that channel first strategy to the buyer first and like what that looks like?
Well, a lot of that has to do with the stuff that we've already kind of talked about a little bit, but understanding who are the buyers that we're trying to engage and attract in this conversation. Where are they going to search for information? And not just where are they going, but where are the LLMs going to better understand your products and services? We spent a lot of time helping clients understand that if we chat GPT a little bit about your area, the first answers coming up are all coming out of Reddit. What is your Reddit strategy, so to speak? Have you thought about how you're showing up in those more social channels? Because those are heavily indexed against when it comes to how LLMs are bringing brands to life on their platforms. And so we've been talking to clients about the journey they need to be thinking about around understanding who their buyers are, where they're going to better understand the products and services they are seeking, and then what they're doing with that information, much like you mentioned, the new ABM. I'm going to borrow that. I love it. Because that's really the kind of the what's next in all of this is understanding that we aren't necessarily always marketing to people.
Yeah.
And we're certainly no longer marketing to companies. I mean, that's kind of a little bit in the rearview mirror. People, yes, for sure. People make decisions, but in a lot of ways, agents are deciding what those people see and how do we make sure that those agents understand us in the most complete or favorable way. What really, we think about this as a return to old school consulting. Oh, yay, yes. Our clients are trying to understand what does my operating model need to look like to meet this moment? How do we need to work? What are our ways of working, much like you have worked through? How do we think about our enablement, our technology, our tools, which is why a lot of these partnerships come into the mix, and really a reimagination of that marketing organization, just like we did years ago.
Yeah, so let me double click on something you said within that I think I'd love to hear from both of you, which is you're now as a marketer solving for two distinct but related audiences, right? As in, what is my content strategy related to the agents, right? And how they find you? How do you be visible for those? But at the same time, you still sell product to people, right? Like that's the end user, right? So how do you find those things to coexist? How do you drive them? Maybe give us some practical examples. I'm sure this group would love to hear about that. How you solve for it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think has been helpful for us as we've kind of engaged in this debate and kind of strategy around marketing to both humans and agents. I think recognizing that AI rewards content that closely maps to the questions that people are asking in these LLM environments. Like that's been our like North Star, right? So it's like, how can we, and in a sense, like has allowed us to kind of think about like, okay, marketers want to talk about their products and whatnot in a very specific way. And a lot of times it's nonsensical, right? So it's like, how do we, we're reading aloud a lot more, I find on these calls that we're having where it's like, does that make sense? Or do we like that? Like, is that really what we're trying to say? So I think there's a bit of a back to basics essentially around getting crisp on problems that you're solving over the products that you're pitching. So that's kind of one of the key things we're thinking about when we're thinking about content. We're also thinking about all the things we've been reading about as far as like conciseness, right? So answering, getting to the meat of like what you're trying to deliver in the first 50 words, not the 51st, 52nd word. Like how do you land that plane? We've talked about the semantic triple, right? Where it's like, you have like Adobe is X, right? Like just being really crisp on like, what do we offer and how are we trying to position ourselves vis-a-vis like maybe legacy Adobe, right? And how we're associated with things like creativity, productivity with tools like Acrobat, like still very important, but like what's that new association that we're trying to establish? And then, like really verifiable proof, right? Of like what we're doing. So not just to say Adobe helps teams work more productively and faster. Like, let's get really crisp on like, okay, through the use of Adobe LLM Optimizer, we were able to go from 0 to 20 pieces of content that we were churning out on a weekly basis to optimize our position in XYZ, right? Like it's refreshing as a marketer because I think it's kind of getting back to like, it's removing a lot of the noise, I would say, right? In terms of how we've gotten lost in the shuffle of it all, and it's creating a little bit of clarity for us, I would say.
But what I would add to that, it's actually initially creating moments of true creativity. Because when you get through kind of marketing to the LLM, marketing to the human can be much more thoughtful, much more creative, much more visual and beautiful because you've kind of taken care of the getting the news across. and you have now understood why you have got them in. You've understood what they've come looking for, how they landed at your door, and can present them with content, whether it's through landing pages or what have you, that is much more purposeful, much more intentful, and creative. Back to what marketers truly want to do, thinking about whether it's beautiful videos or images, just like you talked about the channels before, but connecting them back to that broader story. And I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of our clients as well. They're not thinking so much about, we think about agent optimization or GEO, generative optimization. But then once we get past that, we can get back to thinking about beautiful content that doesn't need to do everything, because we've taken taken care of that, a lot of that education.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you hear a lot of talk of like, is that sort of like a thing of the past? Because we're all just going to like reduce to like
robots talking
yeah, exactly,
robots.
robots talking to robots. But at the end of the day, you're trying to influence humans who are then going and engaging, like they're prompting agents or they're engaging directly in these services. So it's like, how are you inspiring us at the end of the day, right? To think a little bit differently or to like consider a new concept or something, right? So that visual medium, it's definitely feels more important than ever.
It's what's going to differentiate brands, because we'll be able to check the box, and ChatGPT or Claude or whoever you choose will be able to spit out a table that says, these are the capabilities that matter. Here are the products you're considering. Check, no check, no check. But your decision is still a human decision based on something that is a little bit more connected than whether or not you check off a bunch of boxes.
So it's a brave new world, right? We're all still trying to figure it out. And so this is a question to both of you, but I want to focus on Ashley as the marketer, right? And then talk about the consultant, the type of advice that you give. How are you adjusting or not adjusting the success metrics, right? Of not only the money that's being spent, the strategy, like everybody reports to somebody and you have to be like, this is why we're doing this. And then this is how well it worked. Yeah. So maybe help this group navigate a little bit about how to maybe view from an askew perspective success metrics of this new stuff. Yeah,
I mean, this is one of the most challenging areas, I would say, and I think because we've all kind of, I think, conceptually reoriented to this new reality, and that, hey, we can't, we're kind of trying to like turn down the volume on like what's the importance of traffic and click-through rates and those types of like more visceral metrics that we have access to. But the reality is, like, I'm still staring at a dashboard every Monday morning that says pretty much looks at traffic and clicks and RFIs and a lot of on-page actions, and we're not. It doesn't reflect how I'm actually spending my time and the types of conversations that I'm in most of the time. So I'd say like measurement feels like a little lagging, right? And for us, at least, in terms of what we should be looking at to kind of drive the business forward. We have anchored to this kind of like composite score of like, your brand visibility, like on a range from 0 to 100. Like, how do we kind of anchor to some unifying view of like, okay, in this solution, for this buyer in this part of the journey, like how visible are we in their prompt and topic universe that we've defined for that? And it's a flag plant for us, and we're like very excited about it. But at the end of the day, we all kind of scatter out and go into our channels to talk about the things that we're just so comfortable with, right? And that is a very it's just like a very well-trodden path, tons of muscle memory around that stuff, and that's one of the hardest things to break, I would say, in this new world. But getting to, I mean, for us, it's a lot about like, we're just trying to get in the answer, right? So like citations and looking at that sort of stuff more regularly and rigorously is something that we've been able to unlock now with Adobe Brand Visibility. I know we're not doing product pitches, but Adobe Brand Visibility does that, and that's kind of the better together story of like Semrush with Adobe, Semrush solving a lot of the the intelligence layer of like how our audiences and buyers asking questions of your brand, and then the other side of that on the Adobe side is how do you get in the answer, right? So the content and activation part of that like life cycle. So it's a very virtuous loop. And we're looking at measures across all of that, right? Including a lot of operational metrics, which I'll get to, I think, later in the conversation. But there's a lot of things that you don't think about as far as your ability to respond to the opportunities that you're seeing, as far as how your brand is being mentioned and cited, that then spins off like, oh, we should be publishing content, on LinkedIn through a Pulse article. We should be, showing up on G2 with X, Y, and Z. But then it's like our ability to respond to that at pace is another thing that we're really trying to rally around, because that's the limiting factor in all of this. So I rattled off a lot of different measures there, but I think it's one of the most challenging and most important things that we need to be looking at.
I think it takes us back to some of the places we started in this conversation. When we're taking clients on this transformation journey, part of this journey is helping them connect their data, because it still, for the most part, lives disconnected, which is why the reporting we have available to us lives in channel, because that's how we capture that data. And so that's the context within which we can understand it. A lot of our conversation starts with, who do you want to be in this new world? Because so many of our clients have invested heavily in pilots. They've piloted AI for creative with Firefly. Maybe they've piloted AI for workflow. Maybe they've piloted AI for copy and all sorts of things, and lots of really cool pilots that no one ever thought about how they worked together. And we actually would say in this day and age, pilots, not the best place to start, frankly. Start with the picture of who you want to be when all is said and done. What are the types of experiences you want to bring to life? How does the data connect across the bottom to allow you to really understand and really join across the phases of the engagement model, and then report out against that once what you've decided mattered at the end of the day. We've actually worked with a client to build, it's a dashboard, but it does show you a static screen, or a set of metrics. It's not static, but it's a set of metrics. You can also converse with the dashboard and say, well, tell me why that happened, or where did all that come from, or who was driving that spike there? Is this a particular industry? Is this a particular geography? Is this a particular company size, just based on some ancillary metrics? And really thinking about measurement and reporting as a dialogue, and less a set of static actual measures we're looking at, to then understand how to, just as you rightly mentioned, pivot the work in real time.
Yeah, because nobody wants to look at click-through rates from organic as the number that we're being judged on these days. Right? I imagine that's not great for everybody, but things have changed. So let me there's a couple things that both of you said, that I'd love to dive into. So one, when Ashley, I really like when you talk about the classic metrics still matter, right? We can't just throw those out, like the clicks and the conversions and impressions, like these things. You can't just pretend like, oh, that isn't, we can't use what's already been laid. But I actually have, even over the past few days, been talking about, a lot of like classic branding metrics, like going all the way back to a time before the internet, when it was about aided and unaided recall and like likelihood of purchase and favorability of a brand, like these things that still matter. And actually, when you talk about visibility, when you don't necessarily have a direct connection, like that linear versus non-linear, I guess, as we would call it now, there is like this throwback, right? That everybody's been a performance marketer for the past, I'm just going to call it 30 years to round it. And it's like, we have all the numbers, we can target everybody individually, and then you read it in the science of it. So it's interesting here. You got to anchor in what has worked, but also come up with something innovative. But Reema, there was some other things that you would hit on, and I think the number one that is important is you talk about sitting down with each client about what they want to accomplish. I think that's one of the problems that everybody has is there's like this macro trend of like, well, this is what you should do, but it's asymmetrical. Like what your business could be very different than somebody else's. So that actually segues very nicely into something I wanted the two of you to flesh out together with us, was to talk about the Accenture and Adobe relationship, right? Like this partnership, like the brand, the entire shift, right? Of like, for the first time in 15 years, like one of the biggest branding investments that Adobe's done. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you see it from the inside, you as a consultant, like how and why we recommend that, and like what that looks like. I think that would be a very practical example for this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So, by way of background on the enterprise side of Adobe, as Elaine mentioned, we've invested in a brand level campaign, and I think 15, maybe even 20 years ago, it was the last time I saw I wasn't at Adobe at that time, but I think we all referenced this time when we had a brand level investment, and the ambition there has been, we've had a lot of corporate brand building exercises at the Adobe sort of parent level and all of the creative heritage that we have. And what we were aiming to do with this enterprise specific investment was to shift perception, toward Adobe being, not just a leader in all things creativity and productivity through our flagship Creative Cloud products and Photoshop and Acrobat, which is where the most of that recall and acknowledgement or awareness, that's the word, awareness sits today. But then, how do we start to build that association with Adobe and all things on the marketing and customer experience side of all the things that we do, and really position Adobe as a CMO's partner in this new era of creativity, marketing, and AI. Kind of how do we kind of catapult the globe's best brands into this new era and create that confidence in our customers and potential customers that Adobe is their partner here. So we invested in a brand level campaign, and this was this was a glimmer in our eyes a couple years ago. Our CMO Rachel Thornton really planted the flag for us to kind of like, let's just go do this. We ran a baseline survey at around this time last year, where we found that of our primary audience, marketing leaders, CMOs, et cetera, about 15% of them would agree that Adobe is a leader in AI. And so that we were not pleased with that. And we were like, okay, how do we kind of like break through? And that led us to this significant investment that we're making. And a lot of the out-of-home stuff you're seeing here is a part of that. But I'll say that we've actually seen like really tremendous results as a category. SaaS in general has seen like an uptick. I think there's better association now between like software, like the likes of Microsoft and Google, et cetera. Like we're all seen as like, yeah, you guys are investing in AI. We understand that. We got it. But then it's like, how are you specifically going to help me and like prove measurable results as a result of this investment? So we're getting into less the aspirational like possibilities of AI to more like, no, I need to prove real tangible results. So through this broader brand transformation, we've been partnering with Accenture to really think about, okay, how do we make sure that from a brand visibility standpoint that we're instrumenting the right tools, leveraging Adobe technology, the right processes, rethinking our operating model, to really like lean into this moment of building out this big splashy brand moment. And they've been helping us bring to life Adobe brand visibility, put that into market, transform our content operations. I talked a lot about that being the kind of limiting factor. We built out a content pod that is comprised of, copywriters, social folks, PR, AR folks, et cetera, supplemented with Accenture talent. And they've been able to churn out, tens of pieces of content on a weekly basis and really just help us think about capitalizing on all these opportunities that we have to show up and be visible. And I just say that like, this is the brand level campaign, investment, which I'm sure Reema, you have a lot of, exposure to a lot of your clients moving upstream into brand. It's really about just being discoverable in all the places that matter, right? And that's where we've been really focusing, and it's given us a nice halo effect as far as that association between Adobe and all things enterprise. And I'll just mention, because we're talking about metrics, Eli, like the one thing that we're really starting to see in like in a visceral way is that we're looking at like our call logs with our SDR teams in terms of the time it takes for them to land the plane on like Adobe operates in this space. And here's why I'm having a conversation with you in the first place. And that sort of like pitch has reduced. Like it's just like, we got it. We know you guys are operating here. Let's get into the demo. Let's do it. Like we're ready, So those are the types of things we're looking at now, is just that like speed to like, okay, we don't need the big conversation of like, oh, we thought you guys did your Photoshop. Yeah. And it's like, so that's proof is in the pudding for us for sure.
No, yeah. And one thing I'll add to that, just then off to Reema, that is when you think about how powerful that metric is. Like that's a really interesting way to look at it, is how quickly do we get past who is Adobe and what do we do to like, yeah, we know you do that. You're on my final 3 list. I'm shopping, right? Like that's an incredibly powerful thing for a marketer to hit. Then now it's sales' job. Marketing got them in the door, so now sales better go close them, right? That's what we're about. So yes, please.
Yeah, for me, what I'm particularly excited about in all this, just as you mentioned, is our B2B clients are seeing a moment when it comes to brand and marketing. And we're seeing much more investment in the awareness side of the house, which allows our teams to be more creative and have a little bit more fun. We're being asked to come to the table to help drive visibility, awareness, and clarify for all sorts of target audiences what these clients bring to the table. And my favorite part of the story you just laid out there, we're bringing the story to life for Adobe on Adobe technology, so that when we go out there and do the next phase of the conversations we're going to do with our clients and customers, the next set of awareness campaigns, we'll talk about the Adobe story on Adobe. You're your own best case study. And we don't need to convince people that Adobe has these capabilities. We're going to show them how you are bringing down your SDR time, using your own platforms and technology to create experiences in the new. And that's what customers want to hear. They don't want to hear the pitch. Yeah. They want to see the proof. And we're able to do that now in a much more straightforward fashion through the storytelling, but then through actually building the transformation on your own technology. And our ability to kind of run end to end on that helps us accelerate the impact we can have.
We all need a Reema to help keep us on the tracks. But I mean it's really helpful sometimes as a marketer, you own a business, whatever it may be, you can get real caught up inside of your own bubble about this is what we should do or shouldn't do, and having an outside perspective. And I say that in anything in life, right? It's worth the money to go and find somebody to be like, tell me why I shouldn't do this.
Well, we also have the benefit of talking to every one of Adobe's competitors on the same topic and in the same way, and understanding if you don't do these things, you are going to be behind. Now, we wouldn't send the same teams at all these clients. That would be uncute. But we're certainly having a similar conversation to make sure that no one wakes up one morning and realizes someone has shot ahead with an idea we certainly should have had. Yeah.
So that's a good segue into my next point. This is something I want us all to be a little vulnerable on this question. I won't go too hard on it, but I think that one of the things that in learning is you fail, right? Something, you had an idea, a hypothesis out of the gate and said, this is absolutely the way we should go. I've sat in that room, I've made that decision. So this is what we're doing. And then about 5 minutes after that, I was like, and pivot. Right? And that's the nature of things, right? If you're not, I don't want to say failing is the right way, but if you're not you don't win every time, right? You have to kind of figure out what works. So actually, I'd love for both of you, if we think about, let's call it the transformational journey, right? Where we are with what we're working on. It's been playing now for a while. And I'll start with Reema here, because let's start with how you recommend this. What's something that your team had as an initial hypothesis that you're at the beginning when you began this practice and said, this is how we're going to do it, but then you've changed, right? You said that was not right.
Oh, my favorite is all the pilots. Hundreds of pilots on hundreds of platforms. We went back into the Wayback Machine and said, we're going to do head-to-head compares of these two, and then these two, and then these two, without understanding, although I will say some of us tried to say that maybe that wasn't the best way to do it, without understanding that if these pilots don't converge, you're not actually getting to the value you're trying to deliver. Those metrics of those individual pilots aren't actually telling you what the right next path is. I'll tell you my favorite thing I heard from a client, and we're still working this through with her. Maybe good enough is good enough, is what she said, because she was overwhelmed by the work it was going to take, as you and your team have done, to support the LLMs advocating for her brand in the right way. And her answer right now is maybe good enough is good enough. And I think that's a learning a lot of brands are going to have 6, 9, 12 months down the lane, where they didn't move fast enough to meet the moment with the LLMs. And good enough at this point in time is most definitely not good enough.
Do not let perfection be the enemy of pretty good, right? That's very important. Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, we say you got to crack an egg to make an omelet, right? So this idea that you got to start somewhere. And I think there's a lot of trepidation, right? I think as you're engaging across the organization, there's a couple of things. One is you have asymmetry in how different functions kind of understand what's happening in this moment, different terminology and language around, how to think about brand visibility in general. You're trying to normalize all that and bring everyone together. You could be stuck sort of in process discussions infinitely, but you got to kind of just get started. one of the biggest learnings we had was sort of, I mean, we've gone like shoulder to shoulder with our partners. I'm on the growth and, demand gen side of things, but working really closely with my web and like SEO partners, PR, AR, community, social. I think, and I alluded to this before, but we were able to kind of grok where we had the biggest opportunities to sort of stimulate how Adobe was showing up in the prompts that we believe are the most essential that were engaged in those conversations. But we had not an issue in the content strategy or the quality of the content that we were churning out, but more so in the production process and pipelines. In that, we had a very different speed at which we move for like more tops down quarterly campaign cycles that we go through, where like our web team will be booked up with like, hey, we've got our plan for Q3 and, this is my publishing schedule. And, I have a little bit of capacity to respond to like PR related asks or some give, but I'm like, I'm set. I can't do it. Whatever you guys are asking for, like come back next quarter kind of thing. So we had to introduce a fast path essentially because this is not a function that moves slowly. Like you have to be able to be responsive, test, learn, et cetera. So one of the biggest, I guess, pieces of advice I would give is like thinking about, how you're going to work to get this thing to answer the second part of the question. As I mentioned, it's like, how am I showing up? That's great. Like just understanding that analytical exercise, but then it's like, what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do about it probably breaks a lot of stuff. And just to be ready to and think ahead, right? To be able to think through what that process is going to look like. Thinking about new incentives, it's hard to teach old dogs new tricks sometimes, right? It's like, it's hard, right? So just being willing to kind of like take out that blank piece of paper and just sort of start to say, okay, what do we want this to look like? And I think we ultimately got there, but we got there after producing, we had like, 97 pieces of content that we churned out in a couple of weeks and like 30% was published, right? So then you can imagine our, exec steerco was like, what's happening? And we're like, well, guys, it's, there's a lot of like legacy here. Like we're breaking a lot of stuff and trying to get this live. So yeah.
All right. We got 5 minutes left. So what I'd like to do is open the floor for some questions. So I encourage you, if not, I'll ask my own questions. But does anybody have any questions for our panelists that we could address or deep dive on? None. All right, then I will keep going with my own questions. Just making sure. I want to,
you barely paused.
It's not a prepared monologue. I want to make sure if anybody had anything. So a couple things, right, is let's actually talk. One, I want to talk more macro about all clients because, and then I want to talk about, decision making inside of Adobe when you made some of this. But from an all client perspective are there any commonalities that you've seen, amongst the sort of strategy and decision making of the successful clients of yours, the ones that have really like hit it, right? That you could be like, you know what, like I'm drawing a pattern here and I could feel it.
Yeah, for sure. The places where we've seen clients successfully navigate this journey, they have senior leadership support and sponsorship. They have senior leaders who understand the journey that needs to be taken and understand the investments it's going to take and the learnings it's going to take, and they're willing to make those investments. The places where my most frustrated clients are the ones who can't seem to figure out how to crack the code with their leadership and how to help them understand why this matters. And I think part of that is our need to think about old school stories. So we talk about the return to traditional consulting. What's the value case or the business case? How are we going to measure impact and results? And bring it down to the words they understand. We start with talking about productivity and cost savings because that's what the CFO understands and that's what they're willing to invest in. And we maybe park the more kind of creative metrics to the side. Frankly, even the revenue metrics probably come after the productivity metrics right now. And we help shape a story that they can take back that talks about how all these things work together to drive that top line growth. But where we have clients whose leadership isn't completely bought in, or they don't completely understand what they're doing, they might still be living in the land of the pilots, successfully activating that journey becomes very, very difficult.
Yeah, so now you have a third group to solve for. You have the agents, you have the human beings, and you have the people that pull the purse strings that you must also convince. So does everybody like having 3 jobs now? Perfect. Awesome.
That would be less than today. So
right. That'd be you'd be like, yeah, that'd be awesome. I wonder what that's like.
3, yeah.
Well, actually, from the inside for you, like you went through this, right? Like, so how did you and Adobe go about like making your decisions and deciding like getting that buy-in and take it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I think it starts with, for us as customer zero, right? So we're often first to have access to new products and offerings. And I have someone on my team who always says, I don't want to be the first customer. I want to be the 17th customer, right? It's hard being customer zero because you're like, it's patient zero, it's all the things. It's so you have to be, I think just entering these conversations, knowing that, hey, this is not going to be like well ironed out, right? And being flexible and open to like, hey, we're gonna try to like get our, understand how this new capability fits into our current stack, solving real problems, right? Because we often will have something like, hey, we do this today leveraging X, and this thing sort of replaces that. And how do we make sure that it's like we want to be solving new problems, right? In terms of our workflows and the experiences that we're delivering. So I think there's just like a healthy back and forth that we have as customer zero with product around like, hey, this is what we need, right? And that's, I guess that's the ultimate advantage of being customer zero, is that you have that voice back into the product roadmaps.
It's also the feedback they need, because
Yes.
oftentimes these product teams are building for their imaginary customer. And they
Exactly.
haven't taken the time to understand who's actually going to use those products.
Yes.
And we actually do spend time in with the product teams, bringing our practitioners to the product teams.
Yes.
And helping them understand how to create a product people are actually going to want to use, particularly when we now think about how much more actual marketing is being asked of marketers.
Yes.
We see a lot of that happening, right? My team's going to be the one in the system using the tool. Well, okay, if your team's going to be in there, we're going to have to make it something they want to use.
Yep.
It's not the field of dreams. If we build it, they will not just come.
Right,
Like, it just
exactly.
doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the biggest success factors for us, is that practitioner, like that domain expert, being in the room as product is like demoing, and because they can get the higher ups excited about something, and like we all kind of believe in the promise of what can be done, but it's like the pragmatic, like how am I going to use this if this is available tomorrow? How am I going to use this, right? So that I think has been critical to us, kind of getting things off the ground and making it work ultimately.
I love it. Well, this has been fantastic, right? Like I've been on a lot of these this week. I'm sure everybody has like sat there and listened to a lot of people talk, but I really appreciate what is the practicality of it, right? Like, where do I start? What should I do? How do I pivot? So please, I thank you everybody for coming. Thank you ladies both for participating. And I hope everybody else enjoys the rest of their time here and makes it home safe. Thank you.